All right, so hey everyone, we are going to dive into a lot of stories today. One of the ones that I think all of you are going to be interested in is Solana, and does Amazon have the kill switch? My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to TechPath. Today we're going to dive into that along with some other stories. Of course, here streaming live to you today, and of course the big question is going to be, of course, on Solana. But before we get to that, I want to dive over here to Live Coin Watch, take a look quickly at where the market is riding, which market cap is holding at 2.2 trillion. As you can see, 24-hour volume up to around 85 billion, which is a nice little climb there. And Bitcoin dominance holding at about 40.51, which is actually up slightly over the past 24 hours. Of course, Bitcoin still hovering in the 47K mark, and of course has had a little bit of a recovery over the past 48 hours. We've seen it, and hopefully we start to see some movement here. ETH, of course, is holding in at 3,500. Cardano struggling a little bit at 243, and of course, that's the one that I think is on everybody's minds. We're not going to have some stuff on that today because we're going to get into Solana. I want to jump over to this first story, and this basically is by CoinRivet, and the issue is this, and when you look at any kind of startup or beta project like what Solana really is, the scenario that you always have to wonder is the tech that is underlying these coins, these tokens, these projects, and how stable it is. And when you look at Solana's turbo-powered race, which has basically been stalled when the network went offline. We did a video on this a little bit about this a little earlier in the week, but the point was what was under the hood and what was causing some of these issues. And when you look at some of the detail here on the story, it was kind of interesting here. I want to just kind of jump to this right here. In the recent weeks, basically had a high of 214. Many of us have suffered that fall, but it does seem like this honeymoon period is pretty much over, and this was based on the Solana status that came out and said the mainnet, of course, was experiencing, interesting that they put Solana mainnet beta, is experiencing intermittent instability, and that was where we started to see a lot of the action. And if you kind of look at where some of this started going, looks like similar resource exhaustion was a week ago, which is where a forward queued flood, 2 of 3 of those fixes, those were also causing problems in the developer community. But the big one I thought was when you look at where and how some of these projects are going and the speed in which they're running. The Radium, which is anticipated a decentralized exchange, basically it was designed to deliver an automated market maker, AMM, to the ecosystem to facilitate the trading of crypto assets using the liquidity pools. All these things were coming at Solana on a fairly fast basis, and the big issue was that they kind of ran out of juice when it came down to it. And what it boiled down to was there were 2 servers, and I should say server farms, that really were in play here that essentially covered about 40% of the staked tokens on Solana. If those 2 were to go down, the capacity in which it were to affect the overall community could be major in a sense. Now, understanding that Solana is, of course, it is still a beta project, but I don't think a lot of people that were investing in Solana and, riding that coin and that token to the top really were looking at all the details of what these projects were lying out in terms of being a beta project, including ourselves. And I would say when we were looking at Solana and saw the numbers that were continuing to decline, and then we did kind of raise the flag, I feel like some people kind of hated on us a little bit for raising the flag of concern prior to this issue and prior to when we saw the Solana start to take its nosedive. We did see a sentiment start to soften. Now we're starting to see a compounded effect on that, and that's essentially where you're dealing with. Back to this whole point right here, and I want to go to this one tweet. If 33% of Sol's, and let me kind of zoom up on that for you. If 33% of Solana's network goes down, they can't confirm transaction. This particular data center hosts 15% of Solana's active network stake. 2 data centers basically account for 45% of the validators. So in other words, and this came from a very reliable on-chain data source, which is Messari. We've had the Messari CEO on our show here before. And Ryan he's a sharp guy, and he understands the validity of what on-chain metrics can do and why some of these things need to be called out. Of course, they did call it out in advance of what was really happening and alerted, I think, a lot of people to it. So it did have a little bit of a run up to where some people were advised and were alerted. So that's going to be a big part of it. Let's jump over to our next story. And this is really talking about the SALT conference and Brian Brooks. You probably recognize Brian Brooks because he was the former Binance guy that stepped away and essentially kind of backed away from the situation, still unknown as to why that occurred. But his statement at the SALT conference was one that I think is very interesting here. And that is basically, not everything in crypto needs to be regulated. And this is something that, I think a lot of people, when we look at where the SEC is going right now, especially with Coinbase and what we just did yesterday with a video on Coinbase versus the SEC and kind of this whole issue of where the SEC is saying, hey, listen, there could be a lot of securities trading on Coinbase right now. And where the Coinbase side of this is that they need to essentially kind of mount a defense pretty quickly and have even kind of, I think, got the support of where Mark Cuban has jumped into this. But the fact that Brian Brooks has basically come in and said, hey, listen, not necessarily, remember, he's been on both sides of the plate here on the SEC and also on the crypto side of things, or when he was operating at Binance, even though it was a very short term of where Binance. And there are some interesting things that I think happened at Binance that has caused his departure. But the point is this is a very smart fellow that understands the ecosystem and understands the regulation requirements that are really involved in this and why these things are very important in terms of how we start to set this regulation up, because we can't do it with regulation by litigation, which is the kind of the whole concept of where and why the SEC is kind of pushing in that area. So I was interested in this. This was something, and kind of love to know you guys in the comments. Do you think these kinds of regulatory standouts, like a Brian Brooks or like some of the guys from Coinbase, if you look at what Armstrong is doing over there, and if you also see what kind of pushback we're seeing from some of the bigger, influencers like a Mark Cuban, et cetera, do you feel that we need to get bigger groups into it, meaning Coinbase, maybe Voyager, Binance, and others out there in terms of the exchanges to really start to mount a position and go at it like that? Or do you feel like this is one of these things that this is going to need to be handled from a constituency side, meaning our side of things, pushing to our regulators? And I'd love to hear your comments on what you guys think about whether or not that would be a good solution. Let's get over to the next story, which is really getting into where Hedera, and Hedera is HBAR. If you have not had a chance to see HBAR in action, we've had Hedera's CEO, Vance Harmon. He was on the show not too long ago. Great guy. Really kind of gave us some very good insights, I think, to what HBAR was doing. We started to see some movement on the HBAR token. It was one of the reasons we pulled it in. And for you guys that are new to the show, and maybe this is your first time tuning in, one of the things that we do is we'll get a lot of early indicators on tokens and projects that really kind of push us to reach out and, ask for these interviews. And we end up getting these CEOs. We've had the Algorand team on early in identifying what that project was going to do. We had the AVAX, or Avalanche Labs team on very early, again, identifying what was happening. We've done all things around a variety of different tokens. But the whole idea is once that we start to see a project start to move in some of our proprietary data, that's when we start to bring them on the show. So you want to make sure and stay tuned here on TechPath and, of course, the Paul Barron Network to kind of tune into our, kind of our forecast of where we think some of these token projects are going to jump out to. HBAR is one of them. And with this new scenario right here, Hedera Governing Council approves $5 billion in HBAR tokens to boost the network adoption. This is going to be a pretty big deal, I think, in terms of what it means for the governing council. 23 organizations earmarked basically $10.7 billion in HBAR tokens, worth $5 billion to accelerate the network adoption. Again, we see this often with things like airdrops and different kinds of promotion models that many of these token projects will go out and do. This one, though, I think is one that is really kind of for the books. $5 billion in tokens is a tremendous push. But in this release, they did this on CoinDesk. Hedera basically said 5.4 billion in tokens worth 2.5 billion in USD would be allocated to the newly established HBAR Foundation, which amount would go to other initiatives aimed at strengthening the development of the Hedera ecosystem. And again, I think some of this, and I want to jump here before we leave that screen, because this was headed by software mergers and acquisition industry veteran Shane Higdon. The HBAR Foundation will be an independent organization. This is a really powerhouse team that is working on that. And then there you see on Mance Harmon, and I might call him Vance, but it's Mance Harmon, CEO of Hashgraph, said basically the network is now the most used energy efficient, enterprise grade public ledger on the market. And this is one of the big things that Hedera and HBAR really represent in terms of these public ledgers. And I think when you look at these kind of promotion projects on projects like this, now the question is, does this start to move the HBAR token for you? If you're an investor in HBAR, that's really probably what you're asking right now. Here's the quick answer. Yes, it's going to. The key here is going to be the organization of the council that starts to do things that, one, expand the ecosystem. And remember, probably the reason that they are going in this direction is the expansion of the Polkadot ecosystem, the expansion of the Avalanche ecosystem, and even the expansion of the Algorand ecosystem. All of those are some of these big top 20 tokens that have really started to move aggressively in terms of the development. And I think the race is on, and we've talked about this on the show with John Wu, who is the CEO of Avalanche. And he and I talked about this very point, and that was the issue of this transition between Web 2.0 and Web 3.0. What does that mean? Right now, what you're dealing with mostly in the blockchain environment, you're dealing with a Web 3.0 development, meaning we're running on blockchain technology. Now, what is that? That's a combination of Solidity. You've got, of course, if you look over at what's happening at Cardano and Haskell and what their programming language for Cardano and their smart contracts are being done. That is all 3.0 development. And the need for transitioning a lot of these legacy, it's funny that we're calling these things legacy systems, but everything from, let's call it Etsy, Amazon, you name it, Best Buy, all of these different kind of ecosystems out there that eventually have to transition to a blockchain environment are going to need a gateway to make that happen, meaning the old developers working with the new developers and creating that crossover. And in essence, it's almost that bridge that we're seeing a lot of blockchain projects do right now, where they're bridging over to Ethereum to be able to take advantage of the Ethereum ecosystem. That is a good example, including Solana, who has done that. So I think that is going to be one of the key things that really starts to amp up projects like HBAR, that what they're going to have to do, and that's why this 5 billion and 2.5 billion in USD is being injected into the ecosystem, one, to grow that developer base and prepare for this transition that's going to be happening on 2.0 and 3.0, which is coming soon. Over to our next story, and that is going to be AMC is now saying, let's bring in the Litecoin. And the whole point of, and you guys have watched AMC maybe here recently, the issue with AMC, which is adding Ether and Litecoin to a year-end crypto adoption plan, which I think is really, AMC is kind of, I think they've come out of, because listen, I was one of the first to say, I don't know that AMC is going to make it through this whole issue that we've dealt with on the economic challenge that they've dealt with, but I feel like they've been making some very interesting moves here, but they are going to accept Bitcoin payments. Obviously, nobody's going to pay in Bitcoin for movie tickets, and by the end of 22, they're also going to include the popular digital currencies in its crypto acceptance policy. I will have to say this, Adam Aron, who is their CEO, he's actually doing some pretty cool things here. I think he has positioned AMC in a very forward-thinking way. Now, this is where I think it affects the crypto community in a very positive way, because it's always the issue of what is crypto used for? What's its use case? How can we actually implement this into our daily and business operations? I think Adam Aron is finding the way. And if you look at what Litecoin is doing, I use Litecoin to transfer funds because of its speed and it's cheap. Move it over to something like, maybe I'm doing some bot trading on PoundX. I'll drop in Litecoin, move it over to US Tether, and then use Tether to basically move around within my bots. So it has a real functional use case being Litecoin. that being something that you could really use to maybe park money, even though we did see that little bit of a hiccup with Litecoin this week I still believe that was a planned attack on Litecoin, whether it was to do something with Litecoin or try to manipulate the market within cryptocurrency, even though I don't think it even had mainly even a blip on the radar. But that was the issue about Litecoin being accepted by Walmart, totally false. And of course, interesting enough, a lot of the mainstream media, not here, was putting out information that this was a real thing and actually speculating as to whether or not Walmart was going to go in that direction, which was an easy pickup if you actually looked at the press release and what was happening and where some of those sources are going. So that's the first thing you have to do as a journalist is, of course, check those things out. But I like the where AMC is going with this. And the whole point I'm getting at is that with companies, we have to figure out a way to make use case a real thing in this Web 2.0 world or in this real world, in real life world, and figure out how blockchain and crypto is going to play into that. And I think what AMC has done with both ETH and Litecoin being a potential here for currency and used is only going to help them accelerate and ramp up their potentials there for sure. All right, those are the big rundowns there. I want to jump to a couple of things in terms of questions that users have had, and these are some that I think are interesting, but we're also going to jump to some charts here as well. A lot of you guys have asked about Avalanche. We've had John Wu on our show a couple of times, and Avalanche is one of those tokens that, of course, right now is flying and performing tremendously. We identified Avalanche very early on that this was a potential play, and in fact, I think I even made this statement, or somebody tweeted it at me, that said Avalanche potentially is the new Solana. But the whole point being is that Avalanche is not a beta project. This is an ecosystem that is really, really expanding very fast. I think they have something up their sleeve. I just want to jump over here to, and I know we've got some questions coming in on how Audius can grow. I'm going to answer that one real quick. And can we hold Solana for long term? I'll get to that one too as well, Assad. But I want to jump to this one right here on Avalanche, because this is something that we have shown on the channel before. And this one's interesting because in this drop right here, this was Avalanche. This goes back to August 24th. We had this little bump in sentiment, which was 56.33 with an amplification. If you're new to the channel, the way we use our proprietary data is we're looking at two measurements: amplification and sentiment. Sentiment is basically how people are talking about a project, whether they're going to trade it out. Amplification is how basically that implication of people saying something is causing other reactions, and it's usually done by other influencers. The amplification is the key. So back to the chart here. The amp was at 5107. Not bad, but not at all a great amplification number, which of course showed out in the anticipation and basically our prediction of where we thought Avalanche would go. And sure enough, it did. We came back in here. We were right on the money with the exception of right there. Let me kind of just draw out some points here where we kind of missed it. We kind of missed it right here, which was really where Avalanche was trading at around 52 on that point right there at 52.19. And then we kind of missed this little bit of drop right here where it had gone all the way down to $38. And then the movement, we were right in line with where that happened. The bubble that you're seeing right here is the most recent sentiment data that we have on Avalanche. The difference here, I want to show here, this to here is huge. A 61 sentiment, very strong, but the big one is this guy right here. This 63.54 in terms of amplification. That is exactly what causes these kinds of moves that we are witnessing with Avalanche. Now, we're right on top of it. We're going to pull another bubble here in this area right now. We don't have that data, but that's kind of where we're looking now. Where can Avalanche go? As you can kind of see, it's going a little bit parabolic right here, right now. As we're talking, literally as we're going live, the thing is cracking over 60, almost 67. So if you're in Avalanche, good for you. This is one that we've had on very early, and most likely if you were in where we thought you should be, which was around the $40 mark to $35 mark, you've doubled your money, and that's been a good one. Again, these market movers will do these kind of analysis all the time here on the show, and the whole point of these market movers is we'll gather up data, we'll pull together some charts like this, but the main thing, remember, this is not financial advice, not investment advice. We go out in basically financial opinion and really kind of give you guys what you want, and that is a direction on where it's going. Let me kind of jump over here to a couple of the questions. All right, so what do you think about ICB? This is coming in from Ashk Bot. The ICB is, yeah, okay, got that. So I'm hearing stuff here from the production. Yeah, definitely. Gotcha, okay. ICP, do we like ICP? So we had Dominic on the show not too long ago. And the interesting thing with Dominic is he had a very interesting point, and that was that his structure, this was about ICP's FUD, that there are a lot of people still claim that they did a rug pull on everyone. So I think they're past that. So to answer your question, I'm still a positive, I won't say I'm bullish on ICP, but I do believe that ICP is a project we have to watch very closely. Now, if you own it, then the likelihood is you're okay, depending on where you purchased. Now, depending on where you purchased, you're probably okay on ICP. But if you're going to look at it long term, it is a long-term play. It is one of those things, and I've even said this on our ICP analysis, is I think it's one of those projects that is maybe a little too early, meaning because of what it's trying to do. Remember, ICP is trying to do something really that is reinventing the internet. And when you look at that, that's a big factor on how that goes. So would I hold it? Probably I would hold it. I would hold that one. Let's go in here on Audius. This was from Not a Tree. Audius is a project that I like. Audius is one of those that is, and again, if you're not aware of how Audius works, it's basically a creator type project that is designed to help creators be directly paid or monetized rather than going through a lot of these, third-party solutions or even second-party solutions. And it was a token that we talked about here on the channel very early on. Now, we have not done an analysis, a deep dive on Audius, and maybe that's one that we should do. But it is one that I hold, and it is one that I definitely see as a long-term potential. So I do like it. I haven't seen their big announcement today, so I need to go look at that. But thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate it. Not a Tree, loving it. Of course, you guys can hit us in the chat. We love to get your feedback, and I've got you side. I'm going to get this answer for you, but we'd love to get your feedback. Give us some comments below. If you missed the live stream, that's okay. Drop it in the comments. We'll pull those in. Sometimes we'll bring in viewer questions that way. Can we hold Solana for long term? Okay, so this is a sticky subject because it's obviously the topic of today's video. And the point behind Solana is, I think that right now we're seeing Solana on a slide. The problem is I don't know where it's going to stop. The biggest issue, and I wanted to jump to this, let's jump to the chart here, Saad, and just kind of look at where this is going, just to show you what we've done with Solana over the past few weeks. So here is sentiment scoring way back down here in mid-August before the run-up. Sentiment was holding at a 68, but amplification had not really exploded. So we saw a lot of sideways movement. Amplification started to blossom right here, and this was back in August 24th. Then we saw the run-up. We pulled another bubble. Amplification exploded to 75.66, and this is where the fireworks began, which was at around $95, and that's when it doubled up here all the way to our most recent, which was a September 9th. But I want you to see something here, and let me kind of draw this out for you. This amplification limit right here to this is a big difference. And it doesn't look like a lot, but 10 points, 12 points move on an amplification is a big, big problem for any token. So you can see what's happening now in terms of this slide that essentially we're seeing here. Because I think one of the things that we're going to continue to see with Solana over time is probably a continued retracement down here to we could see this down in the 150 to as low as 130. So where it's hovering in right now at 153, I'm afraid that Solana may have a little bit of a down track right here. And again, I own this token. I own it early, but I own it. And I've seen a lot of profits just slide away from this project. And again, I think this is a lot of the FUD that is hitting Solana. But the fact that it is a beta project, I think a lot of people now see this as much more speculation and much more, it's one of those that they may just not jump into as easily. Where right now, if you'd have had a chance to buy Solana at 153 a week ago or 10 days ago, my gosh, you would have been jumping all over that. So that is a difference a week makes for sure. Lots and lots of stuff coming in. What coins are you guys most bullish on? For me, this guy's, it looks like he's going after MCO2. Chill Money, I don't know much on that one. I can't really go into that one. We haven't done an analysis on it. We do have a lot of tokens that, remember, our research team is internal, and then we also have a team in India that helps us with a lot of these kinds of sentiment data analysis that we'll pull against this, and then we'll use and utilize things like Trade the Chain. So if you guys have not had a chance, make sure and check out the link in our description, because we do have a Trade the Chain link there. We are trying to get Trade the Chain on the channel to give you viewers some discounts or some kind of offering. Where reach out to Ryan Gorman. He's the guy over at Trade the Chain. Hit him up, say, hey, check out Paul Barron Network. He's been on our show. And let's try to get Trade the Chain to do something for our community. By the way, we do have a big announcement coming up as we hopefully blow past 100,000 subs soon. But we are going to have a new project called the Diamond Circle. I've mentioned it a couple times here on the show. And it is going to be a very unique way for you, especially you in the live streams, and people that are supporting the channel are going to get a chance to do some fun things. And boy, it is a big project that I think you guys are going to love. So make sure and stay tuned for that. Let's jump into, man, the comments are coming in here crazy. Okay. Thoughts on HBAR after the announcement? I think this is positive. I mentioned it earlier. Could it move the token? Yes, I do think it's going to move the token, but there's two things that need to happen for HBAR for it to move the token. One, they need to increase this developer community quickly, and they need to get a big win with something or someone, and or they've got to be able to do something that is unique and fun that can help kind of get the word out on Hedera, because I think HBAR is one of those projects that is kind of an unknown and unsung hero. It could be early enough because of this. I don't know that this 5 billion, even the 2.5 billion that are going to be pushed into HBAR, will even move the market on this thing. It could cause a little bit of a movement in the token, but I don't know if it'll be sustained. The key here is going to be winning and doing some projects. And a good example of that is Cardano, our friend over at the ADA and IOHK, Mr. Hoskinson himself. And that is when you roll out a project that doesn't have a full, kind of beast mode approach toward the market, and you see a long run at something, people lose interest pretty quickly. And that's where why I think we've seen the Cardano slide off here recently. All right, everybody always asks about Doge. Let's jump over to our Doge chart, because I do want to give you guys an update quickly. All right, so Doge, let's jump over to the chart real quick, and we can kind of run down here. What you're looking at right here on the Doge chart, let me see if we can get the chart up there, guys. Yeah, here we go. All right, so all the way back here into August, early August, we saw the amplification at 62.33. Again, that's a big number. We saw the run up. We predicted this run up right here. These zones that you're seeing in the purple are essentially our predictions when we pull this. So we don't know where this token is going when we paint these out. When we do a predictive run, and you'll see it in some of our videos. If you're a friend of the channel, you've probably seen me do this a lot. The AMP continued to climb though right here, 65.18. We got another little lift, and then we knew that we were going to see a little bit of a bump downward, and it did. Doge did correct kind of a little bit sideways action, and then this right here is where we are currently with Doge. And just to give you an idea, here's where our cone is pushing Doge. So we could see this fall to as low as 22 cents, and our high is looking at around 28 right now. Doge is trading at 23.9. So that gives you an example of kind of how that's going. The cool thing is with sentiment is an amplification is if you see enough of these big movements, which is what it's not a big one. It's an 8-point move for Doge from 65, which was back in, let's look here, 16 of August. and right here on the 6th of September. So you're talking 20 days, and that is a 8-point move downward in amplification. Sentiment also moved down a little bit. So that's why I think we're seeing a little bit more softness in the, Okay, we're going to get into them. All right, super chat question right there from Ferris. Okay, your thoughts on Hex. Oh boy, here we go. All right, the Hex community. I want to acknowledge what you guys are doing and the fact that, I listened to Richard Hart, and I kind of like Richard. I mean, I've listened to his show. I've listened to what he's talking about with Hex. I get his whole pitch, and I understand how the metrics and the tokenomics work on Hex. It's hard for me to get past some of the economics of Hex. Is it a project that I would put money into? That's going to be a big question. And I think right now, at this point, I am still very neutral on Hex. Would I buy it myself? No, I don't think I would. Today, if Richard and I were able to have an off-camera interview together, just he and I, and let's just talk about it, that might be something, because sometimes I think he postures on camera a little differently than, because, listen, you can't hardly outrun him, because he's got so much information and he's been doing it for so long. And listen, the guy has done a tremendous job at building the community. If one thing Hex does have, and this is one of the things that you have to have for a successful crypto project, you have to have a rabid community. No doubt about it. Hex is the only token that I have had users find me, track me down with my email, send me full-blown dissertations on why we should be covering Hex more. So hopefully that answers your question. I'm not against it, but I'm definitely, me personally, would not invest in Hex. I'm still in a position where I'd love to see more data on this. And if you look at Hex and kind of where it's been, it's interesting. It kind of like it continues to perform when Bitcoin does get hit a little bit. But when Bitcoin is running and ETH is running, Hex starts to flatline, and you have to just be cautious, I think, with how you're going to, there you go. Hex is rug pull. That's not me saying that. But there are a lot of people that look at Hex in those kind of scenarios. So it is one of those scenarios I think we're going to continue to see a lot of these projects like this that are going into the crypto space, because there's a lot of them out there, guys. If you are not paying attention, these scammers are out in force. I must get hundreds of emails a month here on the channel in the amount of tokens and projects and dexes and programs that are being pitched in the token space. It is unbelievable. I saw one of the best ones here recently from an exchange in Asia that was trying to get YouTubers to do basically influencer videos, which you've got to be very cautious about that as well, of the channels that you're doing, because when we do an influencer video, we're going to be completely open with you and say, listen, this is a sponsored product. We're going to find as much detail as we can about it. We'll vet it before we even bring it on air. And we do a lot of research. Then we pull all of our sentiment analysis on it to see if this is even sustainable. Some of these projects that we do from time to time are big, and some of these projects that we do are, they're emerging. So they're just getting going. So that's a big one here. All right, Harmony. Hey, that's a good one. I am really interested in Harmony. It's one of those token projects that I think continues to surprise me in terms of its ability and mainly its tokenomics. We're going to be doing a deep dive on Harmony. We actually have some very interesting data coming in on that one, so stay tuned on that. Last one, Elrond. Guess what? We are going to be doing an Elrond market cipher review on Elrond coming up on Monday with Evan Aldo, who is one of our analysts that will be doing a full market cipher analysis, money flow in, really looking at where Elrond could be going. And I think that's one of those that is going to be going nicely. Man, Phantom, still waiting on the thoughts on Phantom. Phantom, listen, if you are a fan of the channel, you probably saw our co-host, Lisa, who had purchased Phantom and made out big on its nice little run here. I like Phantom. I'm a big fan of this one. It is a token I hold, and I just purchased it not too long ago when we had the little bit of a dip and there was a buying opportunity. I like this token a little bit more long-term. I don't know that we'll see a Solana-style run, but here's the key. The key here is going to be on a lot of these altcoins. can and will Bitcoin and Ethereum start to take some wind out of the sails, with exception of the projects that have these big, beastie ecosystems. And the ones I'm talking about are Avalanche and Algorand and Polkadot. Those guys are way ahead of the game right now in terms of the ecosystem. Now, if you know something about a token project that has an ecosystem that is in development that you think is a powerful one, drop it in the comments, because we need to, you guys know there's hundreds of projects out there that probably deserve coverage here on the show, but we can't get to them all at once. We're trying to get to them the best we can when they show up in some of our data analytics, and also you, the viewers, who help us identify some of these early ones that are coming in. All right. Pirate Chain, lots of people have been hitting on that. It's one of those tokens I just don't have enough information on. We have a lot of people that are loving on Pirate Chain. Our studio, many of our producers right here, the guys I'm looking at right now, are big Pirate Chain lovers, and they've been there since the beginning. So that's kind of one of those things. Miami Coin, I still do believe that the city coins and kind of that ecosystem could be a very interesting thing. And we have seen some big numbers coming in from Miami. I think the last thing that one of our producers sent me was that Miami had actually seen like $5 million already out of Miami Coin that was helping the local municipalities. So if that kind of case study, we're trying to get Mayor Suarez, Francis Suarez, who's the mayor of Miami, onto the show to really kind of talk about this, because I think if Miami can come out and really shine with this and show municipal support through a token project, this could be something that could really help a lot of these municipalities out, especially in California, which is really struggling in terms of being able to just maintain their budgets and do some of those things. Last thing I wanted to do, I want to hit on Algorand on our way out to show you the sentiment of where Algorand currently is standing. Sentiment 68.72. We pulled this right here in September the 9th. We saw this little bit of movement right here, and then sentiment jumps up. You'll notice here that the ammo, we like to call it sometimes, the amplification 65.83 is up a little bit. So I do think Algorand has a little bit of an opportunity to maybe get to that 250 mark. And there was a question earlier in the comments that asked, could Algorand make its way up to where Cardano has been trading? And Cardano, of course, we saw the all-time high at $3. I think Algorand has that opportunity. The big thing with Algorand is it's the team. When you look at the people behind this and their connections, it's unreal. This is one of the best teams I have seen in crypto today. And that's always one of the things that I always warn you about. Because think about this with Solana for a second. And it's not that I'm hating on Solana's team, but if you have a really seasoned team in place, you're ready for these kinds of things. And you definitely would not be in a position where you're isolating nodes for potential fail points. If you know anything about the network and understanding that, those kind of things just would never happen. And that's the kind of innovation that you have to have in token projects. And it's not something that you can really forecast. It's not something that they're going to put in a deck and you can read about it. It's something that you have to do your research and find out why Silvio Macaulay, the founder of Algorand, and what he's trying to do with it is so important and why it's so special. That's the key in terms of jumping into any of these projects. If you're investing in projects and you're not doing that kind of due diligence, listen, if there's one thing this channel is going to do for you, it's going to get you into that mind frame. You've got to go and start connecting the dots, because riding these short runs only works so many times, and you're going to lose more than you win. And that's when you're going to get soured on crypto, and that's when you're going to get soured on blockchain. And that's the problem, I think, that is keeping mainstream from jumping into this. It is not there yet because fundamentals are not quite there to be able to isolate and identify like a typical stock. When you look at someone's quarterly P&L, you look at their performance, you look at their sales, those kind of things that a traditional trade fundamentals are being based on in the traditional markets. Crypto is different. So just keep that in mind. We're going to get going today. Of course, we're going to be streaming live a lot more and doing a lot more live action like what we're doing right here. Of course, if you guys want to hit me up, you can do so on Twitter, just at Paul Barron. We'll sometimes show some tweets out here. Lots of love. Thank you. I'll get a shout out for Bill Gorand. I got your tweet. Thank you so much for the fame tokens. And we definitely want to catch you guys on all these live streams. If you have a topic you want to get it in the comments. We'll try to get to it as best we can. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.